I had no idea how silent it would be up there. I mean, hauntingly silent, creepily silent at first, but then all of a sudden you start to you start to come down and calm down. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but when you look at how much time people spend engaged with digital media, which is 12 and a half hours about on average from all our different devices.
Per day?
Per day.
First things first, Michael, where are you?
I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada.
And perhaps most importantly, are you comfortable?
A little too comfortable right now. Got a nice little rolly seat, it's, topped in leather. It's cushiony. This is very off-brand for me. I should be like squatting, just holding a squat for the next hour and a half or something.
Or sitting on a stool with nails.
Yes.
Now, see, that's too far, Chuck. But a stool, like just sitting on a stool, would force you to engage your core. It would force you to incorporate some semblance of balance. It would prohibit you from leaning back into anything that could be confused with a recumbent posture. It, in fact, is a fairly physical thing to do, like when you think about it, as opposed to the lazy boy Barca-lounger.
Yes, exactly. There's actually a researcher I talked to. I think he's in the book. His name's Daniel Lieberman. He's at Harvard. He's an anthropologist. And he talks about how one of the reasons that we have so much back pain in the U.S. is because we have backrests on every single chair. Now, in a lot of developing countries, people don't have hip problems and they don't have back problems. And that's because their resting posture is often they can just pop down into a squat. They'll sit on the ground, with their legs crossed, but they're keeping their torso up, holding it upright. And that's activating a low level of muscle over time that strengthens your back. So our problem is that our back muscles atrophy because we never have to use them to sit upright, and then we go and lift something, and it's like we got nothing to work with, and it goes right to our spines. So.
Your book is really an homage to unintended consequences, and the thing I really enjoyed about it a lot, and if I haven't said it out loud, let me say, yes, I read the whole thing cover to cover. I just finished it, which is a treat because I never get to talk to people, moments after I finish their book. It's usually like a year or 5 later, but I'm sharp, man. Yeah, Lieberman was in your book. I remember him vividly. He made that very point. And I want to talk about everything in your book if we can get to it. But the thing I loved, the biggest thing that I loved is actually the smallest thing. And it's exactly what we just came out of the gate with. It's these tiny little things that used to define us as a species, but we've slowly arbitraged the difficulty out of everyday life. And like a frog in the boiling water, we've just become the batteries in the Matrix, I mean, even just taking a crap, for crying out loud. I mean, I'll never forget the first time in the Boy Scouts where I had to wander out in the woods and drop a deuce. And just the humiliation of pooping up your own pants a little bit and falling over and just not being used to using all of the muscles that you have to use to do the most basic things. Isn't your book really that times 1,000 different things in 1,000 different ways?
Yes. We are like the fish who don't know they're in water, basically. Our environments have changed so much from what they used to be like in the past, and it has in turn changed us so much, but you don't know what you don't know. Someone the other day asked me, they said, did you have to pitch the book before you went and spent a month in the Arctic? And I said, yeah. And so I told them, and in the pitch, I knew that I would be physically working, a lot more. I knew that I was going to be cold. I knew that I was going to be hungry. But there's so many things that I encountered up there that I just had no idea because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
For example, silence. I had no idea how silent it would be up there. I mean, hauntingly silent, creepily silent at first. But then all of a sudden you start to you start to come down and calm down.
I love the way in the book the trip you took really is your permission slip to weigh in on a great many things and bring in other experts who really have a lot to say about all these individual trials and tribulations that you experience. And when I was reading your description of the plane leaves, you've taken 5 plane rides to get to truly the middle of nowhere. You're deep in the Arctic Circle. The last plane, which basically you described about the size of a sofa, maybe, drops you off. It leaves, and you are standing there in this profound quietude. And as I was reading it, I thought, man, it reminds me of the quiet room I went into down in Palo Alto. I hope he says something about that, because that's a hell of a place. And sure enough, you do. And explain to people what it means really to be alone with nothing but the sound of silence.
It's exceedingly uncomfortable at first. What I think is interesting to back up is that today when we go, I need some alone time. I'm going to be alone. We might go sit with ourselves in a room, but we might watch TV. So we're with other people through the TV. We might listen to music. So we're with other people through music. We might be texting people. We never have these extended alone times where it's just us. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, when I was up there, there's not a person within miles and miles and miles and miles. I mean, humans are as densely packed into spaces as they ever have before. And this is very different than we lived in the past. And so for me, standing up there and going, one, I can't even reach out to a person in the form of media right now or send a text or anything like that. But number two, there is no one around here for miles. Like, no one's coming to get me for the next however long it is, 4, 5, 6 hours in the plane. And by the way, it could get delayed because the storms come in all the time. It was definitely a little unnerving, but at the same time also a little freeing, because all of a sudden when you're out of society, you start to go, wow, you kind of shape yourself to society. That's what we do. We're social creatures. And when society gets removed from the equation, you go, wow, I could be anything right now. And that's a little bit strange.
We just don't realize the incredible cacophony that surrounds us all of the time. And until you start to really eliminate that, I remember in that quiet room, I couldn't identify it at first, but it was the sound of my own heart, the sound of blood in my ears. Like you can almost start to hear the sound of your blood circulating. And it is deeply off-putting.
Deeply off-putting is a great phrase for it. I had one time where I walked out and I could hear this and I'm going, is that like, what is that? You know, I'm thinking something's sneaking up on me and this is the end. And it was my wristwatch.
Wow.
Yeah. It's just so silent out there that you pick that up so loudly. How long did you spend in the quiet room?
Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 10.
Wow.
And it was long enough, because what I found is that one of the first things, you know, ironically, you talk about the sound of your wristwatch. The first thing you lose is your sense of time and your sense of everything. It's like looking at the world through the bottom of a Coke bottle. Something is distorted. Something's just not what you're used to. And then, forgive me, I know we're kind of starting in the middle of things, but this juxtaposition of silence with boredom, you know, I asked you about it on stage the other night, because that's also a big deal. This idea of never being uncomfortable sits next to this idea of never being bored. And somewhere in between there is just the quiet that used to come as a matter of course, but we just can't get it anymore. Can you make that make sense? Like boredom and quiet and how that's screwing us up today?
Yeah, I'll try and pull off both those threads. So first of all, I'll start with quiet, since we were just talking about that. Basically, humans have increased the world's loudness fourfold. We live in noise now. We live in a lot of noise. Now, if you think about the context of noise in the past, the noises that we used to hear tended to be natural. It would be like wind, it would be birds, it would be water. And today we have a lot of noises that are created by machines, and they're much louder. And in the past, anytime we heard a loud noise, it was usually a bad sign. Mm-hmm. It's a tiger coming to get you. It is a rock slide that's going to bury you. It's a storm coming in that's going to put you in a bad position. So we evolved to basically associate loud noises with danger. And you still see this today. If someone's sitting there and you walk up behind them and you smack your hands together, we jump, right? Mm-hmm. Well, living in this sort of trickle of loudness has sort of led to a low level of stress, sort of stress hormones being released at a low level all the time. So when you look at people who live near very loud roads, they tend to have significantly high, I think it's like the depression and anxiety rate is maybe 25, 30% higher among those people. And this is even controlled for in nice neighborhoods. This isn't that, you know, people who, don't have enough money live near the road or whatever it is. So it's controlled for in nice neighborhoods. So basically the long story short is that by living in all the noise we do now, it tends to stress us out and lead to some bad outcomes. Meanwhile, when you put people in more silent environments, they find it uncomfortable at first because we've almost sort of adapted to how loud the world is now. But after enough time in it, they start to calm down. They even start to be more productive at work. They don't even realize that they're that much more productive, but when you compare their work to when they were working in spaces that were much louder to when they were in spaces that were much quieter, they get more work done and the work is judged to be higher quality. So it's this kind of like low-level thing that you just don't even realize because, again, it's like you're fishing water, right? You don't realize you're in the water.
Yeah, I talked to a guy a couple weeks ago who works in the cochlear implant world, and they've had some huge breakthroughs. And one of the things that's really fascinating is what happens to a person who's been profoundly deaf their entire life, and all of a sudden they hear sound for the first time. It's actually terrifying. I mean, and it's difficult to imagine, but I think you can, if you've been in a quiet room or just really, if you just ponder it, I mean, it makes no sense at all. You can't describe sound to a deaf person any more than you could describe blue or red to a blind person. So, yeah, we were much closer though to the default position of profound silence once upon a time, I guess, than we are today.
Yeah, I think we evolved in environments that were much more silent, so that's kind of where we tend to sit best. Obviously, I don't want anyone to walk away with the message from this book that I think progress is bad. I think we live in an amazing time right now. We're all over 35 on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
This conversation
Just
right
barely.
Now.
Just barely.
Most people didn't make it past 35. Most people actually didn't make it past 5 in many countries in the past. But I do think that there are some side effects, which you kind of mentioned when we started the podcast. And so it's like, how do we account for those?
Yeah.
The good news is that, people back then, they couldn't change things. They kind of had to wait for things to progress. Well, now we're in this amazing time period, but it's how do we take some of the lessons of the things that used to benefit us in the past and insert them into our lives today?
Got it. Okay. And rather than take a deep dive now on the importance of boredom, let me just go back a little bit so people really understand how far you put yourself out of your own comfort zone. Where exactly were you on the planet? How long did you stay there? And, not to be too ridiculously broad, but, why the hell did you do it?
So we were in a place called, I was with me and 2 other guys. We were in a place called the Baird Mountain Range. So we were maybe 150 miles from Kotzebue, Alaska. You have to fly in there. You land on the nearest, you just land in the middle of the tundra, and there's nothing out there. And we were there for 33 days. And why I went out there is that just through my work, I'm a health journalist. I've written about health and what makes humans happy and find meaning my entire career. And I basically noticed that the things that tend to improve our life, you often have to go through discomfort to get them. So if you want to improve your health through exercise, which is the best way to improve your health, you're going to have to exercise, and that's going to be uncomfortable. But on the other side of that, you get a benefit. If you want to lose weight, that might be good for you, but you're going to be hungry. That's going to be uncomfortable, but you'll get a benefit. If you want to improve your mental health, you probably have to have some hard conversations with people. You might have to ask yourself some hard questions. But by going through that, your life improves. So that's kind of this, I think that's the story of improving our lives in the context of today, is that you often have to go through short-term discomfort to get a long-term benefit. The things that most hurt us, the script is flipped. It's usually selecting short-term comfort, and then that in turn makes your life worse over time. So junk food, not exercising, sitting on the couch, more cell phone time, right? That's like very easy to do. But it often doesn't benefit us in the long run if we overdo it. Nowadays, though, when we feel that discomfort of boredom, that used to kind of be this thing that was, go do something else. Our options were limited, usually limited to things that would enhance our lives. We can dive into a screen or, turn on the TV again. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But when you look at how much time people spend engaged with digital media, which is 12 and a half hours about on average from all our different devices.
Per day?
Per day. per day. Yeah. There's a good case to be made that, maybe sometimes we should see where boredom takes us. Boredom isn't inherently good or bad. It tells us go do something else. We now default to the easy stimulating thing of digital media now.
Did you find yourself becoming increasingly or feeling disconnected from something primal? Like, was something missing in your life that sent you on this level of immersed journalism?
Yeah, I think so. So I got sober when I was 28, and that really drilled in this idea that if you want to improve or change yourself, it's not going to be easy. It's just not. But by going through that, and it was hell. It was not a fun time. Mm-hmm. But my life improved across the board. I mean, full stop. Everything you could measure, everything you could not measure, just got better. And from there, it was kind of a search for, okay, you're kind of on this meaning search now. It's like, well, not dead yet, got a whole new life ahead of me. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do with it? And I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn about, what would not only help me and make me a better person, but because I'm a communicator, ultimately, I wanted to see what I could learn along the way and communicate to others. And I was working at a magazine called Men's Health, and I met a guy whose name is Donnie Vincent through my work there. I did a profile on him, and he's this backcountry bow hunter and filmmaker, travels into the world's most remote, dangerous areas, and he makes these movies that they're shot and they look like planet Earth. Mm-hmm. But they have hunting in them. Mm-hmm. So he has this very unique perspective on the world, on hunting. He's just a very far out, intelligent, wise, humble character. And after doing the story on him for Men's Health, we just hit it off. We became friends. And, he called me up one day and he goes, he's got this Minnesota accent. He's like, Michael, I'm going up to the Arctic for more than a month. You want to come along? And, my initial thought is not only no, but hell no.
Hell no.
But he starts in on this sales pitch. And it's like, it's going to be the most epic thing a human being could ever do. We're going to see grizzlies. We're going to cross ancient mountains and ford glacial rivers. And it is going to change you forever. And, just sales pitch. And I kind of thought back to that observation I'd made about the benefits of discomfort. And so I said, all right, well, that could be a pretty good way to test my theory rather epically. And so I signed on and hung up the phone, told them yes, bought a bunch of gear because that way I was in it, because if I decided I was going to bail, my wife would point to those $400 boots and be like,
did you keep the receipt,
no,
genius?
Dude, you're going up to the Arctic. You're using those boots.